When your husband says he needs rest, you might hear another excuse to check out. Sometimes you're right, but not always, and knowing the difference matters.
Welcome to the Couple Cure.
This discussion is going to feel a little different from some of the other ones we've done. This one is about him doing less, and that can be scary. That can feel like, with everything you've been through, he's not doing anything right now, or at least it doesn't seem like he is. When he has in the past disappeared into screens or hobbies, it wasn't rest, it was escape. And so when he says he needs rest now, your guard goes up, and that's totally understandable. There's a way to tell a difference between rest and one more escape. Real rest helps him come back better. A man who never rests stays agitated, reactive, stressed, anxious, and all of that can land on you. And there's a reason why you want him to get real rest, even though every instinct says he should be doing more recovery work. Rest is not a screen. Rest is something that is going to bring him back to a place of peace. It's going to help him to manage his emotions, bring his intensity down. Instead of trying to turn it off, he's going to learn to process through it, and therefore all that energy and anxiety is going to come down. His old way, whether he's an addict or not, is probably some form of screen or distraction. He's going to play video games, he's going to watch TV, he's going to watch the game, he's doom scrolling on his phone. He's not necessarily doing anything, he's just buried his emotions, he's buried the energy of the day, and he hasn't really done anything to process through it. Rest, on the other hand, can be something active. It can be building something. It can be going outside and sitting in nature. It can be a physical activity that brings a degree of rest that he didn't have. For me, one of the things that Lori did early in my recovery, she said, I want you to go build me a box. I had bought all the tools, I'd bought all this wood. Building a box was actually something that, while it was a little challenging at first, it was ultimately restful. It's not what he does, but it is a matter of whether or not he comes back better, or if he comes back numb, if he comes back more anxious. One of the reasons I gave up video games coming up on 7 years ago now is I would actually come back more anxious. And if you go back to season 6, there's an episode where Lori and I talk about that process as well. It is about how he comes back. Is he ready to re-engage well? When he comes back, if he gets easily upset or frustrated or knocked off balance by something small, then that's the real sign that what he did wasn't truly restful. It was some form of avoidance. What you're looking for is that spiritual fruit of peacefulness that shows up how he treats you and the family. These restful things don't have to take a long period of time. They don't have to be absent from you entirely. They can take 15 or 20 minutes, and you can be in the same room with him if he's truly doing something restful. To whatever degree you feel safe, you don't have to police what he does, but notice how he comes back. A man who is rested is easier to be around. So trust what you feel. That intuition is probably right on. Now, like I said earlier, this is probably going to be hard. While he needs to be doing repair work with you, with your children, he needs to be doing things to work on his character and make it clear that he's working on the stuff you need him to work on. There's also a place for him to slow down, because if he never stops, if he feels like he's always doing some form of work, it keeps him in that busyness cycle. It keeps him in that keep doing and not really be present, not really pay attention. A guy that's coming from that standpoint tends to be more reactive, defensive, and more difficult to live with. I've seen guys where their recovery work has actually become a new form of addiction for them. There's something about how they show up in recovery. It's clear that recovery is just their new distraction. Where you want him to go and spend his time is in being more present, being able to work through his emotional energy and not go to a place of burnout or a place of shutdown where he's just like, this is just so difficult. Rest is actually a part of recovery. Step 11 talks about maintaining conscious contact with our higher power, with God as we understand Him. That is what rest should be, making space to have conscious contact with God without it being, again, all of the typical spiritual behaviors, but just a place of sitting and being. A man who can rest is a man that can finally be present with you too. He's not, wanting to move on to the next thing. This thing's not what I want it to be, so let's move on to the next thing, instead of being able to just say, I'm going to be right here, right now. A man who doesn't have anything left to give you needs rest, and rest is how he refills that tank. Letting him take 15 minutes to sit outside isn't letting him off the hook. It's how he comes back better. Real rest can be short, typically 15, 20 minutes. That's usually enough to get a significant shift away from where I am when I'm feeling anxious and stressed. It doesn't take hours. It doesn't require me to go miles away. Usually I can just step outside. I can take a walk. Most of the time it's about being present and paying attention to something simple, watching the birds, watching squirrels, whatever's out in nature around you. There is a time limit, right? It's something you all both agree on. It's not another way for him to disappear or abdicate as most addicts do. Over time, it's really important to know this, that rest becomes more of a frame of mind and not just an activity. What do I mean by that? When Lori and I would go on vacation, it was miserable. I made everybody around me miserable because for me, I had to get on vacation. And so it wasn't until I got to the destination that I began to rest. The change was for me to realize that before we even start packing the car, before we get to vacation day, I can slow down and be more present and not have to push everybody out the door with a timeline that I've completely put on myself and feel like everybody else has to follow so that we can get somewhere and start relaxing, instead of realizing we can start relaxing now. When he develops this, you'll see him slow down, be more present, carry more peace into those moments. And that's the goal. You want a man who can be calm in traffic, who can be calm under stress, who can be calm at home, who can be calm when you ask him hard questions. If it's just another way to be gone all the time, that's not rest. That's old patterns dressed up in a new way. Going out and playing golf with his buddies, that is not rest. That is him escaping to be away, doing something he wants to do. Real rest is about him coming back to you healthier and better. I do think it's important that you have those boundaries because addicts tend to push boundaries. We are very much like an undisciplined teenager or even worse, child, in that we want to push all the boundaries. So be clear on the boundaries. And then when he does rest, is he more present? Is he easier to be around? That's real rest. And I have some things that I talk to guys about to help them down that path. The first couple of times, it might be hard for him. If he's more on edge or checked out, pay attention to that. See what is going on for him. And over time, you'll know just by how he shows up and not by whatever it is that he did. Next time, we'll be talking about physical health. This is the last piece of the framework that I've built to help men in recovery, to help men prepare for the storms. Send him to stormreadymen.com to take the assessment.